There's one Stoic rule that completely destroys attachment, fear, and emotional dependence. Once you understand this, you'll never look at your life the same way again. You're attached to things you shouldn't be attached to. Your job, your relationship, your reputation, your possessions, your comfort. And that attachment is creating all of your fear and emotional pain. You're afraid of losing what you have. You're dependent on external things for your sense of security and happiness. And as long as that's true, you'll never be truly free. The Stoics had one simple rule that cuts through all of this. It's called the dichotomy of control, and it's the most powerful concept for eliminating suffering that philosophy has ever produced. So what is the dichotomy of control? It's simple. Everything in life falls into one of two categories: things you control and things you don't control. That's it. And here's the rule. You should only concern yourself with things you actually control. Everything else you accept as it is, without attachment, fear, or emotional dependence. Epictetus, who created this framework, said it's the foundation of all tranquility and power. He taught that people suffer because they try to control things they can't control and ignore the things they can. They worry about outcomes they can't guarantee. They stress about other people's opinions they can't change. They fear events they can't prevent. And in doing all this useless worrying, they neglect the one area where they actually have power, which is their own thoughts and choices. Let me break down what you actually control. You control your thoughts. You control your interpretations of events. You control your choices and actions. You control your effort. That's it. That's the complete list. Everything else, literally everything else in the universe, is outside your control. And most people spend their entire lives stressing about things in that second category while ignoring the first. Let's talk about attachment first. You're attached to your relationship. That person makes you happy, gives you security, validates you. So now you're afraid of losing them. You become needy. You compromise yourself to keep them around. You tolerate behavior you shouldn't tolerate. Your entire emotional state depends on whether they're happy with you. That's not love. That's attachment. And attachment always creates suffering. The Stoic approach is completely different. You can love someone deeply without being attached to them. How? By recognizing that you don't control whether they stay or leave. You don't control their feelings or choices. You don't control the future of the relationship. All you control is how you show up in the relationship right now, your choices, your behavior, your integrity. When you understand this, your fear dissolves. If the relationship ends, you'll handle it because you know you're capable of being okay without it. If the person changes or leaves, you don't fall apart because your happiness isn't dependent on them staying. You appreciate what you have while you have it, but you're not clutching onto it desperately. This paradoxically makes the relationship healthier because you're not bringing neediness and fear into it. Marcus Aurelius practiced this with everything in his life. He had wealth, power, family, and status, but he constantly reminded himself that all of these things were temporary. He wrote that everything you see will soon vanish, and those who witness that vanishing will soon vanish themselves. He wasn't being morbid. He was practicing non-attachment. By remembering that everything is temporary and outside his control, he enjoyed these things without being enslaved by them. Now let's talk about fear. What are you afraid of? Probably losing something you're attached to, losing your job, losing your health, losing your money, losing your reputation, losing people you care about. All of your fear comes from being attached to things you can't control. Because if you truly accepted that you don't control these things, what would there be to fear? Epictetus had a student who was anxious about an upcoming trip. The student kept worrying about shipwrecks and robbers and all the things that could go wrong. Epictetus told him that he was suffering unnecessarily. The trip hasn't happened yet. The dangers he's imagining might never occur. And even if they do occur, Worrying now doesn't prevent them. All the worry is doing is making him miserable in the present moment about events in a future that doesn't exist yet. This is what most of your fear is, suffering now about things that might cause you to suffer later. You're experiencing the pain twice. Once in imagination now, and potentially once in reality later, if it even happens. The Stoics said, "This is insane. Why would you choose to suffer twice when you might only need to suffer once, or possibly not at all?" Here's how you eliminate this fear using the dichotomy of control. Ask yourself what you actually control in the situation you're afraid of. You don't control whether you get the job, but you control how well you prepare for the interview. You don't control whether you get sick, but you control your health habits. You don't control what people think of you, but you control your character and behavior. Focus all your energy on what you control and accept everything else as outside your power. When you do this, fear loses its grip. You're no longer afraid of outcomes because you recognize outcomes aren't up to you. You've done what you can control, and that's enough. Whatever happens after that, you'll deal with it when it comes. This isn't being passive or fatalistic. It's being rational about where your power actually lies. Let's address emotional dependence. You depend on external validation to feel good about yourself. You need people to like you, to approve of you, to think highly of you, so your emotional state is constantly fluctuating based on other people's reactions. Someone praises you and you feel great. Someone criticizes you and you feel terrible. You're like a puppet, and everyone else is pulling the strings. The Stoics would say you've given away your power. You've made your internal state dependent on external factors you can't control. Seneca wrote that if you wish to be loved, love yourself. He meant that your worth has to come from within, not from others. You have to validate yourself based on your own values and efforts, not based on whether other people recognize your worth. This is hard because we're social creatures who naturally care what others think. But there's a difference between considering others' opinions and being dependent on them. You can listen to feedback without needing approval. You can appreciate praise without requiring it. You can handle criticism without being destroyed by it. The difference is understanding that other people's opinions are outside your control, so you don't make them the foundation of your self-worth. Marcus Aurelius was the most powerful man in the world, and people's opinions of him actually mattered for practical reasons. But he wrote reminders to himself not to care about praise or blame. He said that if someone can improve you with their criticism, be grateful. If they can't, their opinion is irrelevant. He evaluated himself based on his own standards, not based on others' judgments. Here's where it gets really practical. You're attached to your comfort. You need things to be easy, pleasant, convenient. When they're not, you suffer, you complain, you get frustrated. Your day is ruined because something uncomfortable happened. This is attachment to comfort, and it makes you incredibly fragile. The dichotomy of control shows you that you don't control whether life is comfortable. You don't control traffic, weather, other people's behavior, technical problems, or any of the 1,000 inconveniences that happen daily. But you do control how you respond to discomfort. You control whether you let it ruin your mood. You control whether you see it as a problem or just a neutral event that happened. Epictetus taught his students to practice discomfort deliberately. Sleep on the floor sometimes. Go without food for a day. Take cold water instead of hot. Not because suffering is good, but because it trains you not to be attached to comfort. When you're not attached to comfort, discomfort can't control you. You become resilient. You can handle whatever comes because you're not dependent on everything being pleasant. Now let's talk about attachment to outcomes. You're working toward a goal. You've invested time, energy, money, and emotion into achieving it. And now you're attached to succeeding. Your happiness depends on getting the outcome you want. This creates enormous pressure and anxiety because you can't actually control outcomes. You can control your effort, but success depends on factors beyond you. The Stoic solution is to be attached to the process, not the outcome. You control your effort. You control showing up. You control doing your best work. That's where your focus should be. The outcome will be what it will be based on countless factors you don't control. If you've done everything in your power, you've succeeded regardless of the result. This isn't lowering standards. It's recognizing where your power actually lies. Marcus Aurelius applied this to everything. He fought wars, knowing he might lose. He made decisions knowing they might not work out. He loved people knowing they would die. But he wasn't paralyzed by these possibilities because he wasn't attached to specific outcomes. He was attached to his principles and his effort. As long as he acted with wisdom, justice, courage, and discipline, he'd succeeded in what he could control. Here's what happens when you truly internalize the dichotomy of control. Your attachments dissolve. You still care about things, still love people, still pursue goals, but you're not clutching them desperately. You're not controlled by the fear of losing them. You appreciate them while you have them, and you'd be okay if you lost them, because you know your well-being doesn't depend on external circumstances. Your fears disappear, not because bad things won't happen, but because you recognize that worrying about them is useless. You can't prevent most of what you fear. You can only control your preparation and your response. So you prepare where you can and accept everything else. This gives you a calm confidence that most people never experience. Your emotional dependence ends. You stop needing validation, approval, or specific reactions from others. You stop needing life to be comfortable. You stop needing outcomes to go your way. You become internally stable, regardless of external circumstances. This is what the Stoics called invincibility. Not that nothing bad happens to you, but that nothing external can disturb your inner peace because you've stopped depending on external things for that peace. Epictetus said that freedom is the only worthy goal in life. And real freedom means not being controlled by anything outside yourself. Not by your fears, not by your attachments, not by other people, not by circumstances. The dichotomy of control is the path to that freedom. This isn't just philosophy. This is a practical tool you can use right now. The next time you're stressed, anxious, or upset, ask yourself one question. Is this thing I'm stressed about within my control? If yes, then take action on it. If no, then worrying about it is pointless. Let it go. Accept it. Focus your energy elsewhere. The next time you feel attached to something and afraid of losing it, remind yourself that you never controlled whether you'd keep it. You can appreciate it, enjoy it, care for it, but you can't control its permanence. So love it without clinging to it. Value it without being enslaved by it. The next time you need something from someone else, validation or approval or a specific reaction, catch yourself. Remind yourself that their response is outside your control. You control your actions and your character. That's where your worth comes from, not from their opinion. This practice takes time. The Stoics worked on this their entire lives. Marcus Aurelius was emperor for nearly 20 years, and he still had to remind himself daily of these principles. But every time you apply the dichotomy of control, you get a little freer, a little less attached, a little less afraid, a little less dependent on things outside yourself. The goal isn't to stop caring about anything. The goal is to care about things without being controlled by them, to love without attachment, to pursue goals without being destroyed if you don't achieve them, to live fully without being enslaved by fear of loss. That's what the Stoics achieved through this one simple rule, and it's available to you right now if you're willing to practice it.